Welcome back. Today we're diving into one of the most terrifying and least known disasters of World War II, not caused by enemy guns or torpedoes, but by nature itself. This is the story of Typhoon Cobra, the storm that sank an American fleet. December 1944. The Pacific War is reaching its final, brutal phase. Admiral William Halsey commands the U.S. Third Fleet, a massive armada of destroyers, cruisers, battleships, and aircraft carriers striking Japanese positions across the Philippines. The men have faced kamikaze attacks, mines, submarines, but nothing would prepare them for what was coming. On December 17th, the fleet was refueling east of Luzon. The sky was gray, the waves were high, but the weather reports said nothing serious. Then the wind began to shift. The barometers started to drop. Within hours, the sea went from rough to apocalyptic. They had sailed directly into the heart of a super typhoon. Winds screamed at over 130 knots. Waves rose higher than the masts. The fleet scattered in chaos as walls of water crashed down on ships weighing thousands of tons. Planes were ripped from carrier decks and hurled into the sea. Destroyers rolled at impossible angles, their engines flooding, their decks vanishing beneath the waves. Men clung to rails as rain slashed like bullets and the sky disappeared. The destroyer USS Hull was one of the first to go. Overloaded with fuel, she rolled hard to port and never came back. In minutes, she capsized and vanished, taking more than 200 men with her. Then came USS Monaghan, flipped upside down and swallowed whole. USS Spence followed soon after, her boilers extinguished, her crew lost to the sea. Even the giant aircraft carriers USS Monterey and USS Cowpens nearly met the same fate, battered by the storm until fires broke out on deck. One of the officers fighting those fires was a young future president, Gerald Ford, who barely survived as the ship nearly rolled over. For 3 endless days, the storm raged. Men were swept overboard, ships drifted helplessly, and communication broke down completely. No enemy in sight, just the relentless fury of wind and water. By the time the sea calmed, the Third Fleet was shattered. 3 destroyers gone. 9 other ships severely damaged. 146 aircraft destroyed. Nearly 800 sailors dead, more than many naval battles combined. When Admiral Halsey saw the reports, he was silent for a long time. He had led men through fire, but never through this. The Navy held an investigation, but there was no one to blame except the storm and the arrogance of believing even the strongest fleet could defy nature. From that day on, the U.S. Navy created a new branch of meteorology dedicated to storm tracking. The lesson was burned into history: the sea is the greatest enemy of all. Today, the story of Typhoon Cobra stands as a chilling reminder that even at the height of power, one mistake, one storm, can bring down an empire's pride. The ocean does not care for ranks, or ships, or wars. It only takes what it wants, and on that December week in 1944, it took an American fleet. As dawn broke after the storm, the survivors emerged onto decks torn apart by chaos. The once mighty fleet of steel and precision looked broken, decks twisted, antennas snapped, aircraft tossed overboard like toys. Oil slicks stretched for miles across the gray Pacific, dotted with wreckage and the faint shadows of lifeboats. For many sailors, the ocean that had always carried them now felt like an open grave. Ships searched desperately for survivors from the destroyers Hull, Monaghan, and Spence, but the sea offered little mercy. The few men who had managed to escape floated for hours, battered by waves, burned by oil, clinging to debris while sharks circled below. Only a handful were found alive. When Halsey's fleet regrouped, silence hung over the radios. These were veterans, men who had fought through the Philippine Sea and Leyte Gulf, yet nothing had ever shaken them like this. Typhoon Cobra had shown them that no enemy shell or torpedo could compare to the sheer, mindless power of the ocean itself. Halsey ordered a head count. Reports came in slowly. The final toll: 790 sailors dead, 93 aircraft destroyed, 9 ships damaged beyond repair. The Navy had faced the storm, and the storm had won. Back in Pearl Harbor, word of the disaster spread quickly. At first, many refused to believe it. How could 3 destroyers fast, modern warships simply vanish without a shot being fired? But eyewitness accounts confirmed it: waves taller than buildings, winds that tore through steel, and the horrifying realization that the fleet had sailed straight into the storm's eye. When Admiral Chester Nimitz read the report, he wrote one of the most haunting lines in naval history: "The Typhoon was more cruel than the enemy could ever be." An official inquiry followed, led by Admiral Spruance. Halsey's decisions were questioned. Had he ignored warnings? Had pride led the fleet into danger? But in the end, no charges were filed. The court called it what it was: an act of God. Yet the lessons of Typhoon Cobra changed everything. From that moment on, every American fleet carried trained meteorologists, new storm tracking radar, and emergency protocols for sudden weather shifts. Nature had forced a Navy built for war to learn humility. Years later, survivors described the storm with the same trembling awe they once reserved for battle. Some said it sounded like the sky was screaming. Others remembered the darkness, a darkness thicker than night, filled with wind, salt, and death. And yet, out of that chaos, they rebuilt. The same fleet that had nearly been destroyed by Typhoon Cobra returned to sea just weeks later, to finish the war. The Pacific War would end months after, but for those who survived, the memory of that storm never left. They would say quietly, over drinks or reunions, "We fought Japan, but we survived the Cobra." And in every Navy since, from the smallest patrol boat to the grandest carrier, one truth remains unspoken but always understood: you can fight men, but you never fight the sea. Even decades later, the men who lived through Typhoon Cobra could still feel it: not just the storm itself, but the sound, the pressure, the helplessness. Some said they still woke in the night hearing the howling wind, the groan of twisting steel, and the roar of waves crashing over decks. They said the sea that night felt alive, angry, merciless, like it wanted to erase them from existence. Veterans who had fought through the bloodiest battles of the Pacific called the Cobra the only time they truly believed they would die. In the years that followed, the U.S. Navy studied every inch of that disaster. They replayed weather data, radio logs, and survivor testimonies. What they found was terrifying: the Typhoon had developed faster than any storm ever recorded. Its pressure dropped to one of the lowest points in Pacific history, creating waves so massive they could lift an aircraft carrier like a leaf. In that chaos, even the most skilled helmsmen were powerless. Admiral Halsey carried the weight of it for the rest of his life. To his men, he remained a legend, the fearless bull who led fleets through hell. But privately, those who knew him said the storm changed him. The pride that once defined him gave way to caution, and a quiet grief for the sailors who never came home. Years later, when asked what the hardest moment of the war had been, Halsey didn't mention battles or victories. He simply said, "The Typhoon. The sea is the greatest enemy." In 1945, less than a year later, another storm, Typhoon Connie, struck the same fleet. This time, they were ready. Thanks to the lessons learned from Cobra, ships avoided the storm's core, saving hundreds of lives. The Navy had learned to respect the ocean's warning signs, and to never again underestimate its power. Today, historians call Typhoon Cobra the deadliest natural disaster in U.S. naval history. Wreckage from USS Hull and Monaghan still lies on the ocean floor, 18,000 feet below, their crews entombed in silence. Each year, memorial services are held aboard modern U.S. warships, not for a battle, but for a storm. Because what happened in December 1944 wasn't war. It was a reminder that no matter how strong a nation becomes, how advanced its ships or how brave its men, the sea bows to no one. It gives life, it takes life, and it remembers everything. So when sailors cross the Pacific today and storms begin to rise, they still whisper a name and respect and fear: Cobra. The storm that taught humanity that even in war, the ocean remains undefeated. The legacy of Typhoon Cobra lives not in wreckage or memorials alone, but in the quiet vigilance of every sailor who looks to the horizon and studies the clouds. It changed the very soul of naval warfare, from arrogance to respect, from conquest to survival. The ocean had spoken, and the world had listened. After Cobra, the U.S. Navy founded a permanent fleet weather center, a network of ships, aircraft, and meteorological stations designed to track every pressure change, every gust of wind, every brewing storm across the Pacific. For the first time, weather became as strategically important as ammunition. Commanders who once dismissed meteorology now treated forecasts like battle orders. The ocean had become both enemy and teacher. Survivors of the storm carried invisible scars. Many never spoke of it, not out of fear, but reverence. They said the Cobra stripped away everything: rank, pride, command. In that storm, a sailor was just a man clinging to steel, praying the next wave wouldn't be his last. And those who lived through it understood something few others ever could: that courage isn't just standing against gunfire. Sometimes, it's holding on when the sea itself tries to erase you. In the decades after the war, divers and researchers sought to locate the wrecks of Hull, Spence, and Monaghan. The Pacific, vast and cruel, offered no easy answers. To this day, their final resting places remain unknown, hidden beneath miles of shifting currents and darkness. But perhaps that's fitting. Those ships became part of the sea they challenged, a quiet reminder beneath the waves of the storm that changed everything. Typhoon Cobra reshaped naval engineering too. New destroyers were built with better stability, lower fuel loads, and improved ballast systems. Every future carrier and cruiser was designed to survive storms that once seemed impossible. And yet, even with all the technology, sailors still tell the same truth: the ocean always wins. When Admiral Halsey's name appears in history books, it's often tied to battles, victories, and bold maneuvers. But among sailors, there's another legacy: the man who faced nature's wrath and lived to tell its lesson. Near the end of his life, he visited a naval academy and told the cadets, "No man commands the sea. He only borrows her favor for a time." The storm passed, the war ended, but the ocean remembers. Somewhere out there, over the empty stretch of the Philippine Sea, the winds still shift in sudden fury, and the waves rise without warning. And when they do, it's as if the ghost of Typhoon Cobra stirs again, a whisper through the rain, a warning through the dark, reminding the world that power, courage, and steel mean nothing against the will of the sea. And so, the story of Typhoon Cobra ends not with victory or defeat, but with understanding. The sea had humbled the most powerful navy on earth, reminding mankind that no fleet, no admiral, no machine can master the forces that shape our planet. The storm stripped away every illusion of control and left only truth: that the ocean is eternal, untamed, and absolute. The wrecks of Hull, Spence, and Monaghan still sleep somewhere beneath the endless Pacific, entombed in silence, their crews resting where sky and water meet in darkness. They are not forgotten. Every sailor who studies the charts, every meteorologist who tracks the clouds, every captain who steers through a typhoon carries their memory forward. What happened in December 1944 was not an accident. It was a lesson written in wind, thunder, and salt. A lesson about respect, about humility, and about the price of underestimating nature's power. The sea remains the greatest battlefield of all, older than war, stronger than steel, and colder than history itself. And when the waves begin to rise and the horizon vanishes into storm, even now, sailors whisper her name with awe and fear. Cobra. Because long after the guns have fallen silent, the ocean still remembers, and the storm never truly dies.